Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, I'm going to try to save this Dodge Raider. So if you guys have been following along, you know that I picked up this Dodge Raider along with a few other Monteros. And this is the same thing as a Mitsubishi Montero Gen 1 two-door. And so I'm going to try to save this thing. Now, it doesn't have a title, and it currently doesn't have something very important, and that's an engine. Now, thankfully, I think I have a solution for that, and it appears that most of the other stuff is there. But before we get into what I'm swapping into this and how I'm going to fix this thing, let me show you around this, explain why I think this one is worth saving. So as I mentioned, this is actually a Dodge Raider, and it's the same thing as a Gen 1 Montero, and so I'm very familiar with this. I believe that this one is an 87. Now, it doesn't have a title, so I need to do the paperwork for it, but let me show you around this vehicle real quick. Starting with the exterior, there are definitely some bumps and bruises on it. There's a little bit of rust over here. The body panels are mostly straight, but there's a little bit of paint cracking and fading over here. Come around to the back, you can see that somebody ran it into something back here. The hitch is a little bit bent, a few more scuffs over here, and then this ding right there, that scratch in the paint. Those are the ones that stand out to me, obviously. The frame is in okay shape, a little bit of surface rust, but underneath, it's actually complete. So everything underneath the car is still there. It still has the differentials, it still has the drive shafts, transfer case, transmission. It's just missing the engine. On the inside, there's a lot of good to be had as well. It's mostly complete on the inside. There's these seat covers because there is damage to these front seats, but these look pretty good. It's got the bench seat in the back, although I do think it needs some repair. Headliner is still there. Most of the plastics are still intact. Going over to the front of the interior, you can see all of this stuff is still here. Climate controls look good, all that. Someone did something custom here, which I don't love, but I'm gonna see if I can work with that to fit this singled in dash. You don't need to do this, but somebody did. Looks like they might have installed some switches there. And then you've got a funky shift lever here. Shift lever is actually stock, but the shift knob is kind of weird, not really period correct. And then I'm missing a transfer case shift lever. But it's got things like the armrest that functions. It's got the fun gauges up here that everyone loves, and it's got a complete dashboard. So overall, things are looking pretty good in here. So why out of all the cars that I picked up do I think this one is worth saving? And the answer is pretty simple. It's basically ease. So this one is set up for the carbureted motor. It's really easy to drag and drop one in here. There's not a lot of wiring. There's not a lot of other things that go into it. It's a fairly simple motor swap. So that's what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be swapping a motor, just the stock motor, back into this one, see if I can breathe new life into it and get it back on the road. Now, one of the issues that I'm gonna have to tackle with this is I do need to get it registered, which means I need to pursue a title. I already had a police officer over here to inspect the VIN. It is in fact not stolen. So now it's just up to me to do the paperwork to make sure I can actually put a license plate on it and get this on the road. But we'll get to that later. For now, let me show you what I'm swapping into this Gen 1. So this is the motor that I'm going to be putting in that black Dodge Raider. This is my little blue Montero, and I have had this thing for the last 4 years, and I've had this motor and I've done some work on it, but it's time for this one to go. Now, I'll be explaining what I'm going to put in here. The little blue is not going away, but I knew I was going to pull this motor out and put something else in, so I might as well put this to good use. And as you can see, I've already started tearing apart this engine because, honestly, I just got really excited and couldn't contain myself. So there's a few things that make this swap easier and pretty good because this motor not only has been taken care of well by me and maintained well, it's also got some really good modifications. So the first thing I want to point out is it's got the Weber carburetor. This is a highly sought after modification. Adds a lot of power, adds a lot of simplicity, as you could say, because the other one has tons of vacuum lines and it's just a disaster to work with. And so this is huge. It's got the matching intake manifold from, I believe, Redline. And I know that all this works because I've been running it for the last couple of years. The other thing it has is right here, which is actually down here at this point, is these headers. And whether or not these headers actually supply any kind of power gains is debatable. But either way, it's got the headers and that adds some simplification as well, gets rid of the EGR. And so other than that, this was a good motor. It's been gone through. I put a new head on it, did the valves and all of that. And the other thing it has, which some of you guys who really know the G54B will know this, it's got balance shafts in it, and those have actually been deleted by whoever did some of the work before. So this is a good engine. I'm excited to not trash it because, like I said, I knew I was going to be replacing it with something else, but I didn't want to just get rid of this because It's a good engine. A few other things I was paying attention to when I was thinking about doing this swap is what parts are going to match up. So there's a few things that are different on the Dodge Raider. The first one is the coil location. You can see my little blue Montero has the coil here. The Dodge Raider has it up there. I'm not sure that'll make a difference. The power steering lines are a little different. This high pressure line has a different fitting over here. The coolant overflow reservoir is also in a different place. It's over here on the passenger side versus mine was over here on the driver's side. Now, I have no idea if any of those things will make a difference, but if they do, I've got parts from both so I can kind of mix and match until they fit. So now that I figured all that out, pulling this motor is super easy. You take off the exhaust, you can leave the intake and all of that attached, disconnect some of the wiring, so that's the coil, the alternator, disconnect the vacuum line that goes to the brake booster, the heater core lines, the coolant up in the front, and the bell housing bolts, and this thing should pop right out. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this thing out, get it out, make sure everything is looking good, and we'll get it swapped in. All right, looks like the motor is free, so I'm gonna try to hoist it up and get it out of here. Hopefully there's nothing else attached because I'm just going to rip it out. And there it is, the motor's out. So back under the hood of the Dodge Raider, you can see there's a lot of good stuff in here that I already need. It's got motor mounts, and I might reuse these. These actually feel pretty solid. The transmission feels pretty good. There's no way to really know until I try it out, but I think this one's probably in better shape than the one in my little blue Montero, and I bet that throwout bearing is also in better shape. It was covered when I first bought it, so the previous owner, when they pulled the motor out, they did protect that, and so it should be in good shape. I need to hook up things like the slave cylinder right here for the clutch. I'm not sure why that's disconnected, but that bolt is rusty, so I need to replace that. And then I've got all the wiring. Now, one of the big reasons why I decided to swap this one is because all of this wiring is the same. Sure, I could maybe mix and match and do some stuff to make sure that I could swap anything into anything, but this is so much easier. And so I should be able to just drag and drop. And because I have things like the headers and the Weber carburetor, this should be a way easier swap. In the back of this car, I did find an air filter for a Weber carb, so I have a feeling that that was already installed right here, and maybe it got pulled with the motor. I'm not 100% sure. So this should be pretty drag and drop, aside from the things that I mentioned, like this reservoir is over here instead of over there. The power steering lines are slightly different, but I think those should be swappable all the way through. This is the same steering box, and so I should be able to just move all of that around. There's a few things that are a little bit different. Things like this coil, I'm not 100% sure why it's there. Hopefully the wiring harness is the same. Otherwise, I'm sure I can make it work. One thing that I am going to steal from this car before I drop the motor in is the AC system. So I very foolishly deleted my AC system because it didn't work in my little blue Montero, and now I want it back. So this has everything I need. I left these connections to the evaporator core inside of my Montero, and so I already have that. So I need to grab these right here, all of these lines. I need to grab the actual condenser in here, the dryer, all of that stuff needs to come out, and I'll figure out how to make that work in my Montero later. But before I drop the motor in, I know I want to steal that stuff, so I'm going to get to that. All right, with a little bit of struggle, I've managed to get the AC stuff out. It honestly wasn't too bad. I got most of the hoses and things out without a trouble. The only issue I had was right here, so hopefully I can get this off. I did end up just cutting it, and I'll try to get that off now that it's outside of the vehicle. Hopefully it's not galled up too bad. No idea if this stuff works, but I figured because it's in this car, might as well give it a shot. So now I'm back to prepping the engine bay. Like I said, I've eliminated that. It actually cleans up the grill area quite a bit. You don't have all that condenser stuff over here, pulled all the sensors. I went ahead and I disconnected the distributor from that coil. I'm gonna go ahead and see what that looks like once I get the motor in here. And now I'm gonna tackle something that is a common failure point with these, apparently, is that throwout bearing. So that throwout bearing is currently seized. The one in my little blue Montero is also not doing super well, but I have an extra one. So I'm gonna swap that out before I get into swapping the motor in. But after that, I think we're ready to drop this thing in and see how well it hooks up. All right, very thankful that I have this just laying around. Here's a whole another shift fork assembly with a bearing that rotates a lot more cleanly. The other ones that I have, they're really crunchy. So I got that one pulled out. I'm gonna go ahead and put that in, get that guy lashed into the ball for the fork, and then we should be ready to go. right, so I got a little carried away, and now the motor is in and it is bolted to the bell housing, and I've already connected most of the things. So let me walk you through this. It's a pretty simple process, the exact same as it coming out, and these motors are super simple. A few things that I did change is you can see this exhaust manifold is the old style one, and this one, it's got an O2 sensor. I don't really care about that. It's also got the EGR delete, which I care a little more about, and especially because I don't have that stock manifold. But the other one, I just could not get it to fit. It came out of my little blue Montero, but I could not get it to fit. I ended up with a huge gap here, and I remember having some fitment issues with it. I wonder if the transmission is ground down on my other one. I'm not 100% sure, but either way, I'm gonna go with that and see how it runs. The other thing I did is I started working on the carburetor, and I'm realizing that I'm a little bit short here. Here's the kind of spot where you can put the bolts, and then this is the wire that's coming out of the black Montero. And so I'm not 100% sure what I'm gonna do about this. I might just extend this by getting another crimp and extending the wire, because it's just not quite reaching. And I wanna make sure that I can take care of that. And then I'm moving over to the ignition system. On the little blue Montero, the coil is down here. Now it's up here. I think I have all those wires correct. So I'm just hoping with that, we'll fire it up and see. Then I connected things like the heater core, the radiator, all of that stuff. I deleted the AC from the engine because, like I said, I'm gonna save it for my little blue Montero or whatever I end up doing with it. Either way, this one doesn't have AC. I was able to connect the power steering lines. I just ran the same ones from the little blue Montero over to here. And then I had some issues with the alternator, so let me show you what was going on with that. So here's an interesting difference that I found in the wiring, and specifically in the alternator. You can see this is the alternator out of my 84 Montero, and this is the one that came in the back of this Dodge Raider right here. And you can see the plug is different, but the body is the same, and these are both Mitsubishi. So I'm not entirely sure why they'd moved from this one to this one. Like I said, they seem really similar. As far as the geometry goes, I think they're gonna bolt up just fine. That one's got a fan, this one doesn't. This one might be a generator, and this one might be an alternator. I'm not 100% sure the difference. Maybe someone can tell me in the comments. But either way, instead of changing the plug for this one, I'm gonna just go ahead and swap the alternator because it's easy enough. So I'm gonna put this one in. This is the one that came out of the original wiring harness for this car, and so I figure better stick with this one. So I'm gonna slap it in. So now that everything is hooked up, there should be very little to do before I'm ready to fire this up and see if it works. The one thing I know I want to do is I want to drain the gas tank. I have no idea when the last time gas was put in this. I have a feeling it's really old, and so there's actually a plug at the bottom of the tank. This guy right here, and that's how you drain the gas tank. And so before I do anything, I'm going to go ahead and drain that. This is always a little bit risky because you have no idea how much gas is in here. You don't know if the gauge works. And so this could hold up to 15 gallons, which is a lot. And so be prepared with some 5-gallon buckets to catch some gas. I'm gonna get that drained out and hopefully fill it up with some fresh gas and fire it right up. There is an issue if this is full of crap, then it might have contaminated the lines, and that would be a huge pain, but we're gonna start with the easy stuff. We're just gonna remove this, drain out the gas, and hope for the best. All right, the motor's in, got fresh gas in it. I've got the throttle hooked up well enough that I think it's gonna work. So I'm gonna get in there, I put a battery in, and we're gonna crank it. Now we've gotta pump all of that gas from the tank up into the carburetor. So it's gonna take a minute, but I'm hoping that this thing will run just as well as it did when I took it out of the little blue Montero. Theoretically, everything's the same, but this is the true test. So let's try to start it. All right, this thing is running, and of course it is. It ran great in Little Blue. I'm super stoked to have this thing fired up. So I'm gonna let it warm up. I'm gonna check the vital signs a little bit, make sure nothing's leaking or doing anything weird. Oh crap, I gotta put water in it. Well, that was close. I totally forgot that I didn't put water in this thing. Thankfully, I didn't run it for very long. It's not even hot. So I'm gonna get this thing topped off with coolant, and then I'm gonna pull it out of the garage. The one thing I'm really concerned about is the transmission. And when I say really concerned, it's just because it's an unknown variable. The transmission in this car, it seemed fine. I played with the input shaft and it seemed like it was okay. It's shifting through the gears, but I haven't tested it yet. So I'm gonna get this thing topped off with coolant. I'm gonna check everything inside, make sure it's running right, and then we're gonna take it for a test drive. All right, first test drive in the Raider. This thing's awesome. It drives so good. The gauges don't work quite as well as Little Blue. You can see right here, my tach is working, my gas gauge is pretty low, the speedometer works, The engine temperature seems to be really cold. I'm not sure what's up with that. And the oil pressure gauge doesn't work. I'm thankful that I know that this oil pressure works, because otherwise I'd be freaked out by that gauge. But shifting through this transmission, I mean, this thing is smooth. It's buttery smooth. The throw-up bearing is not making any noise. That clutch that came off Little Blue, shifting great. I'm super pleased with this. This is awesome. So now that I got it running, this is huge. I just need to figure out how to get it legally titled so that I can get it on the road and pass it on to somebody else. So it is great that this one is up and running, that's on the road. I'm working on figuring out the title right now, but naturally, that means that Little Blue has an engine size hole inside of it right now. And so it pains me to say this car's not on the road right now. It's not driving right now. But I have a plan for it. I knew the whole time when I got into this project that I didn't want to keep this motor in the Little Blue Montero. I just was tired of dealing with the carburetor. As much fun as it is to have something simple like what this has got now, it's just not great for Montana. We have so much fluctuation in temperature. We go so high up in elevation and then down so low. It's just not something I was having fun with anymore. And now that I'm running 33s, I wanted a little more power. So let me show you what I'm going to be doing to fix that problem. So this is the solution to the problem I have with the Little Blue Montero not having a motor. This Mighty Max, as you would have seen in another video, has a complete motor, transmission, and transfer case. And it's the same exact thing that came in the higher model short wheelbase Monteros. And so I know that this will work inside of that car. So that's the plan. And this has been a plan for a while now. I wanted to motor swap Little Blue in some way, shape, or form. This just happens to be a great way to do it. And it's a Mitsubishi product, and so I'm keeping it a little bit OEM, a little bit stock. I'm not doing something too crazy with it, and I kind of like that. So I hope you guys have enjoyed watching me restore this one, get this one back up on the road. I'm going to be selling this. I don't need to have another one around. Like I said, I've got enough going on, and I'd love to see this passed on to someone else. And with these getting so rare, they're hard to find in running, working, good condition. And so I'm excited to pass that one on. I'll also use the funds from that to fund the motor swap into this, as well as another project. So thanks for hanging with me in this. If you guys are excited about this swap and the other things I've got going on, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.